Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to my autobiography, The Perils of an Interesting Life. This is episode 11, or 12, depending on how you count. Apparently, I labeled two videos as episode 9. So there is episode 9 and episode 9B, so I guess this makes this episode 11. We'll call that 9A and 9B, and we'll just make this 11, although there's been 12 episodes. Anyway, this is chapter 11. This one is called Barry and Larry. So, leaving off from chapter 10, I left you with me and Kevin hiding in a dumpster. And how that in that moment, I swore that I would never be afraid again. That I would train and train and train until in any confrontation, I was not afraid of what someone might do to me, but rather I was afraid of what I might do to someone else. That I wanted that confidence to be such an intense warrior that I was afraid of my own abilities. And I'd like to say that I eventually reached that goal. And still today, in any confrontation, I'm not at all concerned about what someone might do to me. I'm very good at avoiding getting hurt. So, people can try to hurt me, and even if I don't fight back, it's hard to lay a glove on me, even in my old age. I'm very quick. You might have seen that in some of my videos. If not, you're going to see more, because I'm going to start working out more and showing more of that when the weather turns better. But I did accomplish my goals that I set in that moment. And in that moment, I was just determined to never suffer that level of self-degradation again. That I was never going to hide like a scampering rat in a hole from someone. That I was going to be a man and stand up and act like a man. And I was going to do it without fear. And I believe I accomplished that through years and years and years of training that started that day. But to know what happened next, I kind of have to back up in my story and explain to you who Barry and Larry are. Because when Kevin and I split from that apartment being chased by those guys on the motorcycle, we were not just running randomly through the night. We were running in the general direction of our friend's house, Barry and Larry. Now, who are these two guys? And what's interesting is that Barry is going to be a major character in my life in the future storytelling. But this is how we met Barry and Larry. So I told you that I was working and Kevin wasn't. So I only had the one car, and Kevin didn't have a car. So rather than leaving him home stranded while I was at work, he would drop me off at work and then run around in my car. I guess best friends, you let best friends do stuff like that, let them borrow your car. And so Kevin had been a stoner since he was young, and it was relatively a new thing to me. So we didn't know anybody in Texas, and we were very afraid of being arrested for trying to find pot because, it was highly illegal in Texas at the time and still is. And but there are head shops everywhere, and it's this game they play where you go in and you buy all this marijuana paraphernalia in an open store in Texas, but in reality they tell you, this is for tobacco use. We have to tell you this is only for tobacco use. You know what I'm saying? It's just tobacco use, They can't use the word bong and silly stuff like that. And but anyway, the main one in town was called the Glass Pipe in Arlington, Texas, right there on Collins, right near Six Flags, actually, Six Flags over Texas. And well, nowadays it's right down the street from Texas. What do they call that place? The ballpark in Arlington, and the new stadium. Yeah, they got a new stadium right there. For where the Cowboys play. So all that was happening is right there in Arlington, and but my buddy Kevin, he went up to the gas pipe, and he had made a decision. He did this while I was at work, that he was going to wait for the stoniest person, like the most obvious stoner, to walk in, and then he was just going to go up to him and go, "Dude, you got to help me get some pot." He did not discuss the plan beforehand. He took my car down to the gas pipe with this plan in mind. And the guy he picked was a guy that I would later get to know as Larry. And Larry was originally from the Midwest somewhere, like, I don't know, Indiana or Michigan, Illinois. He was from Illinois. And, Larry was about 6'2", Real tall and thin, had long red hair that just went clear down over his shoulders, and he wore a little bluesman hat like the Blues Brothers, little fedora, and always wore bell-bottoms and earth shoes. So he was really a weird-looking hippie dude for Texas. He stuck out like a sore thumb. I still think he may be the stoniest-looking guy I ever met while I lived in Texas. So Kevin just goes up to this total stranger, and he's like, dude, get me pot. Help me out. I'm from another state. I just got here. I don't know what to do. I'm from the West Coast where it's everywhere. Get me stoned. Well, we were both 17, but Larry was pushing 30. Larry was right around 30 at the time. And so he took it upon himself, like the big brother kicked in, and he was like, look, you goofy kids, you're going to get arrested. Here, shh, just follow me. Follow me. And he turns around and gets in his car, and Kevin follows him back to his apartment, where he scolds him for being so blatant as to just walk up to somebody in public and try to solicit marijuana from him and tell him be glad I'm not a cop. But then he gave him some pot and got him stoned. And when he picked me up from work, he told me the whole story of how he had made this connection with Larry. And Larry had a roommate named Barry. And Barry's going to be in several of these next few episodes because he was kind of a bigger player in my life. Him and his family. Let me just say, I dated some members of his family. Later on. But anyhow, that night we were headed to Barry and Larry's house because we had become friends with them. Larry was a martial artist. He was very much into the bow staff was his weapon. Being 6'2" or 6'3", having a 6'2" staff, that's a pretty intimidating package, you know. A guy with that long arms and a long stick can reach out and touch you. You better have a gun, because otherwise you're just out of luck, because he's gonna lay you out with that stick. And Barry was the opposite of Larry. Barry was the quintessential little sawed-off short Texan, the little Audie Murphy-sized Texan, you know, TNT in small packages kind of thing, you know. And he's probably 130 pounds soaking wet. You know, he had like a 27-inch waist. He's a little bitty guy. But, you know, ready to fight at the drop of a hat. He'd throw down with you. He just did. He's not taking nothing from you. And he ain't going to a FEMA camp neither. He's still that way. But, so he was a gun guy. You know, he had a couple of different guns, a pocket pistol and a shotgun, I knew for sure. And he had this cool four-wheel drive truck, a 1979 Chevy Love, four-wheel drive with this classic, does this sound familiar? If you're a fan of my channel, you know I've described this truck before because it would go on to be my truck. I would later buy this same truck from him. And the shotgun in question would later be mine as well in another related transaction. So we climb out of the dumpster where we were hiding, and we make it to Barry and Larry's house, where we tell them the story. And I love Barry's reaction because it was so, it was just so quintessential Texan. When I told him the story and where they ran us out of the house threatening us with rape, he just stops me right there and he goes, well, that right there is bullshit. That is completely unacceptable. We are not going to stand for that. That's some bullshit right there. Sorry, I don't normally cuss on the channel, but it was just so quintessential Texas reaction, you know? And so we jumped into their two vehicles, Kevin in the truck with Barry and me in the 1972 Coupe de Ville, Cadillac Coupe de Ville. That's what Larry drove. Big old Cadillac. And anyway, we pulled up in the parking lot of the apartment complex where they couldn't see us, me and Larry, and we got out of the Cadillac. And Larry had a big bow staff, and he gave me the curtain rod out of their apartment, which is a sizable wooden dowel, you know. And we walk up, and we find the three villains sitting on the front steps of my apartment on the second story looking down at us, sitting there smoking a cigarette. And, you know, they do not know that Barry is in the four-wheel drive truck with a shotgun and Kevin in tow. And what does Kevin have? They gave him something, too. I don't know, he might have a machete or something. I think they gave him a machete. They gave me a stick. But, you know, Larry was determined that I was going to stand up for my apartment. He gave me the stick and he says, you go up there and throw them people out. We're just your backup. You can do this. So I marched up and I'm like, you got 1 minute to get out of my house. And I saw that they were wearing my clothes. And I said, and you got 1 minute to go up in there, change out of them clothes and put your old nasty clothes back on and get out of my clothes. And you leave, and don't you take one little single thing of mine. Not one, not nothing, not a sock. You understand me? And the little sawed-off meth head looking one that had spit in my face in the previous episode looks down at me and goes, oh yeah, what you gonna do about it, tough guy? So they figured they still had the advantage 3-2. And about that time, Barry and Kevin roll up. And Barry's got this sawed-off 16-gauge shotgun, and he's in his hand, and the shotgun are inside of a cardboard tube, like what Visqueen plastic comes in, like a big roll of plastic will come in a square tube. He's got one of those in the truck, and he's got the gun inside that, and his whole arm in it, and he's sticking it out the window, like the whole thing is just like his arm inside of a cardboard tube. Could have been a bluff, could have been a shotgun. Ding, 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 it's a shotgun. Okay, it's not a bluff, it's a shotgun. And he's just about the right distance to get them all everybody gets a chunk of buckshot at that range, including us if we didn't hit the deck. And when he rolled up like that, with his arm sticking out the window at him, they changed their attitude and they changed their tune. And now it was 4-3 with a gun involved. So they apologized. They went up. They changed out of my clothes. And as far as I could tell, they left with nothing except the clothes on their back. They even left behind their own groceries, which I gladly ate. Like, they bought a bunch of groceries and left. I ate them. They came back later in the middle of the night. I was by myself. Well, me and Kevin were there with no gun or anything, but we had the house locked up. When they knocked on the door, I went out to the patio and looked down at them from the patio. And, you know, they wanted their food back, and I told them that, you know, they threatened to rape me, so I already ate their food, and I was going to continue to eat it, and they better get lost before I called the cops. And so that's how I got out of that pickle and reclaimed my apartment. And my friendship with Barry and Larry, me and Kevin and Barry and Larry kind of became this, you know, these guys that were always seen together. We were just hanging out all the time together. It bonded us, I guess, the situation. And, but as time went on, Kevin started really drifting away from me. And it really started to get noticeable because he just had this criminal element. Well, Kevin would go on to serve a long term in prison for possession of methamphetamine on a scale that is mind-boggling. I believe he was the subject of one of the biggest meth drug busts in Pacific Northwest history that would land him in prison for, I don't know, 7-8 years, I think. He went in for a huge, huge amount. But that would be many, many years. That would be many years down in the future, long after we stopped being friends. But he had that criminal nature, which I did not really possess. I'm not that kind of person. And, you know, we were friends, but then we were just kind of incompatible. And the more he crossed over to the dark side, the less I would go over there with him. I just wouldn't go down the dark road with him. And so his sister just showed up in Texas, his sister from Oregon, with her estranged husband, that they were back together, and her estranged husband had been some kind of construction worker who'd gotten injured on a job site and received like a $80,000 insurance settlement for an injured back. And by the time that they had made it to Texas, they were seeing how long it would take them to party through 80 grand. And they were doing it with intravenous cocaine. So they were shooting up cocaine in needles. And when they hit our house in Texas, when they came out there. And they actually got an apartment, and they stayed for about 6 weeks. But during that 6-week period, Kevin spent more time with them, and I spent more time at work. Until one day, I came home, and he wasn't there. And there was a party going on in my house because we'd taken in another roommate and let him crash on the couch to try to cover the rent. Well, because Kevin wasn't working, I had to get somebody to cover the rent, help me cover the rent. And when I was asking around about Kevin in the middle of this party, I get home and there's a party in my apartment, and Kevin's nowhere to be seen. And so I asked my buddy Matt, who was staying there too. I was like, "Where's Kevin?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "What do you mean? Where's Kevin?" He goes, "You're kidding." I'm like, "What are you talking about, Matt?" He goes, I can't believe he didn't come and say goodbye." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Kevin left for Montana about an hour and a half after you went to work this morning. He was supposed to come down to your job and tell you, that he was leaving." And I went and looked in the apartment. All his stuff was gone. And I wouldn't lay eyes on Kevin again until we were both old, gray-haired men in our late 40s. And then we would finally reconnect after all that time, when I finally would come back to Oregon and look him up. And boy, he had an interesting life too. That boy needs his own YouTube channel. You'd probably watch him too, because he had a really interesting life. But, you know, my friendship with Barry and Larry deepened, and I kind of used them as an example on how a young man should conduct himself. And, you know, before long, I was doing quite well. And, you know, in the next episode, I'm going to tell the story of my relationship with both Barry's sister and his rather youngish, attractive cougar mother. Don't. I shouldn't have dropped that at the end of this deal. I don't know. Now I have to go and tell the rest of the story. I guess I'm going to save it for another video. But let's just say that Stacy's mom had it going on.